Alright everybody, so we are going to be looking at a commander deck that I fell in love with. Many times throughout my career of playing Magic, I've always wanted to play a commander deck that ran Esper, blue, black, and white. It's a great set, it's a great combo, it runs all the cool artifacts, but Send Triplets was just too oppressive, so I decided to jump into the commander partner aspect. So what we're going to be looking at today is the partnering between Silas Renn, Seeker Adept, and Rebbec, Architect of Ascension. Silas Renn is a 2/2 Death Touch. When it deals combat damage to a player, I can choose target artifact in your graveyard, and you can play it this turn. So basically, it's like graveyard recursion. Big surprise for me, I know. Rebbec, on the other hand, says artifacts you control have protection from each converted mana cost among artifacts you control. So if you have an artifact that costs 5 mana, all of your artifacts have protection from converted mana cost 5. So my thinking was, drop down Silas, get him ready to, start swinging at opponents, and then give him protection from various different converted mana cost amounts. And that would be just a wonderful way to get damage through and protect your board and just keep growing the board state until it is too late. So let's dive in and see exactly what we got. So the only 0-drop is a Welding Jar. This card is just painfully obvious that it is 110% worth running. 0 mana for an artifact, sacrifice it to regenerate target creature. So you can even swing with Silas, knowing that you have a Welding Jar ready to regenerate it, knowing that your Death Touch is going to kill your opponent's creature, and if they don't block, you can grab something else from the graveyard. Beautiful. Alright, we got a bunch of 1-drops. Let me just grab those. Alright, so we have a Disciple of the Vault. You should know what that card does if you're at all involved in Commander. When artifacts put in your graveyard, you can have an opponent lose 1 life. Just a great way to hit an opponent for 1 life every time towards the end of the game. Esper Sentinel, one of the newer-ish cards from Modern Horizons 2, I believe. White mana for a 1/1. Whenever an opponent casts their first non-creature spell each turn, draw a card unless that player pays X, where X is Esper Sentinel's power. People call it the Rhystic Buddy. Rhystic Study is a pretty famous card that lets you draw cards. This only costs white. It's a 1/1 artifact, so it's got other avenues for destruction, but it's pretty good if you can keep recurring it. And even better if you can put +1/+1 counters on it. Alright, Executioner's Capsule. There's a lot of these in this deck, like spell bombs and things that just basically do stuff, like cheap, easy sacrifice artifact stuff. Executioner's Capsule, Nihil Spellbomb, Origin Spellbomb, and Soul Guide Lantern are 4 of the most, I'd say, powerful cards in this deck because you can destroy a creature, then swing with Silas, and then play this again. Nihil Spellbomb lets you exile cards from graveyards. That's an amazing ability in Commander. When it's put into the graveyard, you can pay black to draw a card, so you get card advantage, and then you can play it again for 1 mana. Origin Spellbomb makes a 1/1 colorless Mer artifact creature. You can pay white to draw a card from it being put into the graveyard. And Soul Guide Lantern does a bunch of other cool stuff too. Enters the battlefield, exile target card from a graveyard, sacrifice it, exile each opponent's graveyard. That's great because it's asymmetric. And 1-tap, sacrifice it to draw a card. These are great cards to play early, drop into play, gain some advantage, and recur them back with Silas. Wayfarer's Bauble pulls a land into play tapped. It's an amazing card, easy ramp, and then you can keep playing it every turn. We got some Swords to Plowshare for removal, and we obviously have a Soul Ring for ramp. Those are the 1-drops. Nothing too fancy, but, some necessary things in this deck. Alright. Now, checking out our 2-drops, Ethereum Sculptor lets us have artifacts cost 1 less. It's just great. Baleful Strix is probably the most valuable blue-black creature for such a low mana cost. Enters the battlefield, draw a card, flying and Death Touch. I'll gladly trade it with one of your larger threats and then play it again with Silas later. Aethersworn Canoness. Each player can't play a non-artifact spell this turn. If they've already played one. I worded that wrong. Each player who has cast a non-artifact spell this turn can't cast additional non-artifact spells. This deck is mostly artifacts, so that effect is asymmetrical for me. I can play this and keep playing more artifacts, and I can play 1 non-artifact spell per turn. Dawn Charm is one of my favorite cards. It's 1 in white, choose 1, prevent all combat damage, so you already have a fog built into it. Or regenerate target creature, or counter a spell that targets you. Those are three major things that will happen in the Magic universe, in the Commander world especially, because those three things are the major three threats. We have a good old-fashioned counterspell from Ice Age, and we got some mana rocks. We have 5 of them: Arcane Signet, 1 mana of any color of your commander's identity, the 3 signets that tap for the 3 color pairings, and also a Mind Stone, because you can sacrifice the Mind Stone to draw a card and be good from there. Alright, let's pick back up on the 3 drops. We got a bunch of those. So one of the things about this deck was I like to sneak in a bunch of other cards that I'd like to run as commander, but I put them in a 99. So like, you're going to see a lot of legendary creatures that all fit into this nice Esper artifact theme. Sai Master Thopterus, 2 in blue for a 1/4. Whenever you cast an artifact spell, create a 1/1 colorless Thopter token with flying, and you can also pay 1 in blue, sack 2 artifacts to draw a card. Really, really nice for drawing stuff later in the game when you need extra fuel. Emery is a card that I thought would be way too oppressive as a commander, but 2 in blue for a 1/2, costs 1 less for each artifact you control, so most of the time this card just costs blue. Enters the battlefield, mill the top 4 cards of your library, and then you can also tap to choose an artifact card from your graveyard, you can cast it. Basically the whole idea of the commander deck, but put onto 1 creature instead of having to attack. Armix Filigree Thrasher. Whenever it attacks, you can discard a card. When you do, target creature defending player control gets -X/-X till end of turn, where X is the number of artifacts you control, plus the number of artifacts in your graveyard. This is just a great way to discard cards, and then get a bunch of like field clearance with this creature, pave the way for Silas, and do some damage. Palladium Myrrh, 3 mana for a 2/2, taps for 2 mana. This type of mana ramping is super valuable early and late game. Crystal Shard, and a nice time-shifted card. 3 tap or blue and tap, return target creature to its owner's hand unless its controller pays 1. Most of the time, this card is not for my opponent's creatures. This is for my creatures to rescue them and pull them back to hand if they somehow don't have protection from Rebbec or anything else like that. Skeleton Shard, the other side of that, 3 tap or black tap, return target artifact creature card from your graveyard to your hand. Again, we're just pulling stuff back to try to be as recursive and annoying as possible to our opponents. Mirrodin Besieged, enters the battlefield, choose Mirren or Phyrexian. Mirren, whenever you cast an artifact spell, make a 1/1 colorless Myrrh artifact creature token. That's great. Or Phyrexian, beginning of your end step, draw a card, then discard a card. And if you have 15 or more artifacts in your graveyard, target opponent loses the game. So this is just a beautiful, beautiful way to, have a win condition and also have a way to generate more 1/1 chump blockers. Or maybe you want to build up an army for Tempered Steel, 1 white for an enchantment, gives all of your artifact creatures +2/+2. That makes them really scary. Word of Invention is a great way to find cards. Blue, and X with Improvise. Search your library for an artifact card with converted mana cost X or less and put it into play. Then shuffle. That is amazing as well because you can tutor almost anything and your artifacts can make it cheaper. We have a couple removal pieces. Generous Gift destroys a permanent and gives them a 3/3 elephant. Sure, they can have that. Anguished Unmaking, exile target non-land permanent. You lose 3 life. Just a nice way to get rid of stuff. And a Commander Sphere for additional ramp, or you can sacrifice it to draw a card and then play the card again. What I like to do with this is, as Silas Renn is attacking, I can tap, or well, not necessarily attacking, but you can tap for mana for do stuff, sacrifice it to draw the card, and then you can play it again. If you have a way to pull the extra mana in or anything like that, or if you have Emery, you can tap to float a mana, sacrifice it to draw a card, use that mana you tapped for to play it back into play, and just get stupid value out of it. All right, our next 4 drops. Again, bunch of commanders. Padim, Council of Innovation, or Console of Innovation. Artifacts you control have hexproof. Ooh, give them protection and hexproof. I love it. Beginning of your upkeep, if you control the artifact with the highest mana cost or tied, you get to draw a card. So this does just 2 amazing things in Commander. Arkham Dagson, another sub-commander for this deck. Tap, target artifact creature's controller sacks it. They can search your library for a non-creature artifact card, put it into play. You'll see later on there's some bonkers artifacts in here that are not creatures that are just oppressive as heck. Master Transmuter, not necessarily a commander, but definitely a valuable card to run. Blue tap, return an artifact you control to its owner's hand. You may put an artifact from your hand into play, including that artifact you just returned. So if somebody targets it, you can bounce it back, and then you can put it back into play. So it's good for protection, it's good for enter the battlefield effects, it's good for just everything. Urza, one of the most bonkers busted commander cards out there, just because it's in blue and all the amazing abilities that it has. 2 blue for a 1/4. Enters the battlefield, create a 0/0 colorless construct that gets +1/+1 for each artifact you control. You can also tap an untapped artifact to get blue mana, and you can also pay 5, shuffle your library, exile the top card. Until the end of the turn, you can play that card without paying its mana cost. 3 amazing abilities on this creature. Teshar, another example of a wonderful commander that I'd like to someday run. 3 in white for a 2/2 flying. Whenever you cast a historic spell, return target creature card with converted mana cost 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. Historic cards mostly are going to be the artifacts in here, but there are some legendaries that could also trigger that ability. Whirler Rogue makes Silas unblockable with the tap 2 untapped artifacts. It also makes 2 1/1 artifact Thopters, and it's just an overall amazing card. Phyrexian Metamorph, 3 and Phyrexian Blue. It enters the battlefield of any artifact or creature on the battlefield, which is great because it can, copy anything. And then while it's in the graveyard, it's always going to be an artifact, so you can play it and constantly copy stuff. Solemn Simulacrum, 4 mana for a 2/2. Enters the battlefield, you get to search for a basic land, put it into play tapped, then shuffle. When it dies, you draw a card. Just being able to recur this dude again and again and again is quite the thing. Mechanized Production, we have another win con in here. Enchant an artifact you control. Beginning of your upkeep, create a token that's a copy of enchanted artifact. Then if you control 8 or more artifacts with the same name as one another, you win the game. Doesn't even have to be the one that you enchant with this. So if you can make 8 Thopters, that's a win condition. I've done it where I've put it on Solemn Simulacrum, and I've had like 6 Thopters out in play, and I just keep making copies, and everyone's focusing so much on me getting 8 Solemn Simulacrums that they forget that I'm working my way up to Thopters, and the win condition happens. Akroma's Will, this is a great finisher card. Choose one if you control a commander. Since I have 2 commanders, it's a little bit easier to have one on the battlefield. Creatures you control gain flying, vigilance, and double strike until end of turn. Or I guess I should say. Creatures you control gain lifelink, indestructible, and protection from all colors until end of turn. This has got to be the game finisher. If anything, it will at least give you that extra life boost to let you just drag out the game to a finish. Utter End Exile is a permanent, just an amazing, amazing card. And Vanish into Memory is a card that once I saw it, I was like, ooh, there is more to that than meets the eye. 2 white and blue, instant, remove target creature from the game. You draw cards equal to its power. At the beginning of your next upkeep, return it to play under its owner's control. If you do, discard cards equal to its toughness. This thing is nice for just like digging and finding solutions. It's good for getting it back into play with getting rid of it for a turn. But the real major thing about this is, what if your opponent creates a 10/10 token? Well, you play this, you exile it, and you draw the 10 cards. You don't return tokens back, which is pretty bonkers. All right, now we got to wrap it up. Since it's 5+ is such a small group of stuff, we'll just plow through this whole thing. Aethersworn Agitator is just abilities on a stick. 5 mana for a 4/4 flying, so you got some air presence. 1 white, black tap, destroy target creature or enchantment. That's great, and you can pay 2 in blue to untap it. So you can just keep destroying stuff as long as you have the mana for it. Sphinx Summoner, 3 blue and black for a 3/3 flyer. Comes into play, search your library for an artifact creature card, reveal it, put it into your hand. This just fetches any utility thing that you need. Scourglass, tap, sacrifice Scourglass, destroy all permanents except for artifacts and lands. Play it only during your upkeep. This is just a nice thing to put onto the battlefield that keeps people hesitant to develop a board state. Norn's Annex, just a great card to get for really cheap into play. Creatures can't attack you or a planeswalker you control unless their controller pays white Phyrexian for each of those creatures. So if they're not playing white, they're paying life to attack you. And if they got 6 1/1s, they're probably not going to take that trade-off. Sharum the Hedgemon, again, another sub-commander in the deck. 3 white, blue, black, 5/5 flyer, enters the battlefield. You make a return. Target artifact creature from your graveyard to the battlefield. You can get infinite enter the battlefield effects with this and Phyrexian Metamorph. So that's pretty cool as well. Because you clone it, you make a copy, legend rule applies, and then they just keep cycling over and over again. Sharding Sphinx, 4 blue blue for a 4/4 flyer. Whenever an artifact creature you control deals combat damage to a player, make a 1/1 blue Thopter artifact creature token with flying. Here's the thing though, that's an artifact creature, so you swing with this alone, you make an artifact. You swing next turn, you get 2 more Thopters. You swing with all 4 of those, you get 4 more Thopters. You just keep doubling every turn if your opponents let you get through. Noxious Gearhulk, 4 black black for a 5/4 menace. Enters the battlefield, destroy another target creature. If a creature is destroyed this way, you gain life equal to its toughness. Great artifact utility to just play out, gain some life, and also drop a 5/4 menace. Duplicant, again, it's just great removal. It's not a specific color, so giving things protection from blue, red, white, green, whatever, doesn't really work with this. You can exile a non-token creature, and it has the power and toughness of the creature, which is kind of neat. You can sometimes like exile some big, large stuff and have a big face on here, but this is really just for instant removal. Not instant, for just regular recurring removal. All right, we have the Immortal Sun, 6 mana. This is just a bonkers card as well. Players can't activate Planeswalker's loyalty abilities. You'll notice there's no Planeswalkers in this deck. Beginning of your draw step, draw an additional card. Love it. Spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. Love it. And creatures you control get +1/+1. These 4 abilities tie in perfectly to this deck in every single regard. Mindslaver, it's just a staple card to run in Commander because it's fun. 4 tap, sacrifice it. You control target player's next turn. You make all the decisions for them. It's fun. Merciless Eviction is a great way to get rid of enchantments and planeswalkers, or if you're trying to really get rid of some pesky nuisances, you can get rid of artifacts or creatures as well. Nice way if your opponent does like a one-sided board wipe or something like that. Memnarch, another commander tossed in, 7 mana, 4/5, 1 blue blue, make a permanent, an artifact in addition to its other types, and 3 in blue to gain control of target artifact. Just keep stealing artifacts, and if you can't steal anything good, you can make something an artifact and take it. Taking lands is kind of a jerk move, but hey, at the end of the game, it's sometimes nice to starve your opponent of that resource. Magister Sphinx. This is a card that I was iffy in putting into the deck, but also I've had some friends who've played life gain, and when they're at 700 life, this is the only way to really get them down to a normal level. 5/5 flyer. When it comes into play, target player's life total becomes 10. Mirror Battlesphere. This is the thing you can keep bouncing or returning to hand somehow, get it into play, make a ton of Thopters, and then swing in for a huge, huge threat. Pentavis makes 1/1 Pentavites, and you can sacrifice them to put counters back onto Pentavis. It's a nice way to like shift around things to kind of like, create a Pentavite, block an opponent's creature, sacrifice the Pentavite, put it back onto Pentavis, and not have to worry about losing anything really. Filigree Angel, 5 white white blue, 4/4 flyer. Enters the battlefield, you gain 3 life for each artifact you control. I regularly gain 21 to 27 life with this card whenever I play it, and I try to keep recurring it as well. Darksteel Forge makes all of your artifacts indestructible. You kind of need that. Metalwork Colossus. This is a card that I personally love. It's an 11 mana for a 10/10, costs X less to cast, where X is the total converted mana cost of non-creature artifacts you control. So Mana Rocks, Darksteel Forge, anything like that. This card is very often 0 mana or a very, very tiny amount. And you can also sacrifice some artifacts to return the Colossus from your graveyard to your hand. So we got some more additional recursion. And finally, a card that I just saw this and I was like, I need to make this work in the deck. At 11/11 for 4/5, it's a Mycosynth Golem. Affinity for artifacts, so 1 less for each artifact you control. And then artifact creature spells you play have affinity for artifacts. This is just good for getting like the graveyard stuff into play for free. So you can leave your mana open for some control or counters or things you want to play or whatever. This is just nice to get the cost of artifact plays to nothing. Alright, lands are nothing super special. Command Tower and an Arcane Sanctum for just mana diversity. I have 2 of the artifact lands in here. Inventor's Fair is an absolute beast in this. Beginning of your upkeep, if you control 3 or more artifacts, you gain a life. Taps for colorless. 4 tap, sacrifice it. Search your library for an artifact card, reveal it, put it in your hand, and shuffle. Only if you have 3 or more artifacts. Just a nice little fetch to grab stuff. Rogue's Passage makes Silas Renn unblockable. Academy Ruins just brings back more recursion if you need something in a pinch. Phyrexia's Correlates, you gain an artifact to gain a life. Some artifacts want to be put into the graveyard so they can come back into play again. Tomb of the Spirit Dragon, 2 tap, you gain a life for each colorless creature you control. If you have 10 Thopters out, you can use this land to gain 10 life. That's big at the end of the game. Buried Ruin, 2 tap, sacrifice it, return an artifact from graveyard to hand. Watery Grave, Hallowed Fountain, and a Godless Shrine. Those are just obvious. I put in 5 fetch lands, Polluted Delta, Bloodstained Mire, Windswept Heath, Flooded Strand, and Marsh Flats. And then we have basics. I chose Starter Islands, 4, 5, 6, 7 of those. I chose Foil Plains, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of those. And some real old swamps that say tap to add. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 swamps. So leans a little bit more towards blue, but not too much. But yeah, that's pretty much the Silas Renn and Rebbec deck. They're great, they're amazing, they are beautiful partners. The foil etched are not stupid expensive, so they're definitely worth picking up as well. These are just a lot of fun, they're pretty neat. Not too many people have seen this particular deck partner pairing. A lot of people kind of use it as like just a nice way to recur and do some serious damage. Also, I wanted to add that I did not put in anything that I found online. I put in stuff from my collection and stuff that I really enjoyed piecing together. So this may have a little bit of a custom homebrew. I might have missed some of the ideal stuff found on EDH Rec, and that's completely fine. These decks are not supposed to be perfect. They're just supposed to be a viable and consistent level of giving people, you know, a commander engine, spin it up, you know, let them have ways to take apart the deck, let them have ways to fight it, and let them have fun. I play Commander for fun. I don't really play for competitiveness, but this is a little bit more on the slightly fine-tuned side of that. So, again, those are always great conversations to have with your group, so make sure that you are following that, and remember, healthy communication makes for healthy Commander games. So thank you very much for watching, and if you have any questions, toss them in the comments. Later.